Okay, so you saw the DVD, Changing Your Mind DVD. And on there, for instance, you remember the story about Courtney. And Courtney is saying, "I'll never get my spelling words right." You remember that? And we talked about that, and we said, now what is that true, we said? Is that true? And no, that's not true. Never's not true. But here's the thing. We do have these little lies that are floating around in our head all the time, and that's kind of what we talked about on the Changing Your Mind DVD. But what I've found is that Satan really loves to attack us with some awfully big lies sometimes. And what look like little lies really are big lies. And so with Courtney, she says, "I'll never get my spelling words right." And that is kind of a little lie, because we all know that never's a long time for a little girl to not get her spelling words right. But what Satan likes to do is attack us with something much bigger. Because down inside Courtney's life as an 11-year-old child, yeah, she was saying never, and yeah, she was all upset. But there was something much bigger going on. There was something inside Courtney that said this: if I get my spelling words right, and if I can perform better, then I am better. Something down deep inside Courtney, even at 11 years old, knew, if I could perform better, then maybe my value would be higher. Okay? So, what we find is, we find that Satan, when we talk about these lies, we find that Satan has a couple big ones for us. And his big one is this: my worth equals my performance plus other people's opinions. Now, we don't know at that moment what Courtney was really going through. She could have been thinking, if I would get my spelling words right, I could feel better about myself. But she might have also been thinking, maybe my dad will like me more if I get my spelling words right. So we don't know exactly what Courtney was thinking. But these big lies are ingrained from a very early age into each one of our lives. Because of this world we live in, they're ingrained from a very early age. And even Courtney at age 11 was catching on to what these are like. And at age 29 and 35, I was still fighting these same lies that Courtney's already been introduced to at age 11. Now, I think this again hit home just a few weeks ago. A guy came to me, and honestly, he was recommended to talk with me. And I remember sitting down and talking with him, and this guy could not stop crying. Okay? Which, frankly, is a little weird for me. Okay? I mean, I'm okay with guys crying, but this guy could not stop crying, And I'm like, oh my gosh. But we were sitting there talking, and he was telling me his story. And here's how the story went. It went something like this. This guy's name's Paul, we'll say. This guy's name's Paul, and here's his story. He said, let me tell you what's going on. Last fall, I got to be friends with a guy. My friend's name was Bob. And he was really struggling. And to be honest with you, he was put in prison. He got incarcerated. And I would go and I would meet Bob every week. I would talk to him. I'd get to know him in prison. And in fact, over that period of time, I led him to Christ. And it was a great time for us to be able to get to know each other and, as brothers in Christ. And then when he got out of prison, he said what I did was I talked to my wife, and I invited Bob into my house. I thought, he's getting out of prison and transition from prison into the world. It would be good to bring him into my house. So I talked to my wife about it, and she was okay with it. And then he went on Paul went on to tell me a little bit about his wife and about how his whole life has been spent in an attempt to please his wife. Paul's been a Christian for decades, and he has been working hard for decades to do everything he can to create an environment where he can please his wife. He's explaining this to me. And I said, okay, so far so good. And then he says, so in January, Bob moved into our house. And in February, I found out my wife was having an affair with Bob. It's killing me. I've done everything I possibly can do to please my wife. I've been a Christian to Bob and a nice guy. And this is the thanks I get. And I'm destroyed. Now let's look at this for a second. Let's take a step back and ask this question. Here is Paul doing everything he can to please his wife. And over a period of decades of that, of Paul trying to rescue the Bobs and trying to please his wife, what happens to his wife's respect for Bob? I mean, everywhere he goes, he tries to say, okay, whatever I can do, whatever I can do, whatever I can do. Does the respect for Bob go up or down over a period of decades? It goes down. Every time I turn around, she says, my husband's just going around trying to help please everybody. And you know what? It's kind of gross. And even a guy like Paul wakes up and he goes, but I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was doing the right thing. And Satan looks and smiles, kind of like the uncle out of the Screw Tape Letters, and goes, I got him just where I want him. Because he's connected his value and worth if people like his wife and his friend like him. And now I've got him. Now here's the problem, guys. This friend of mine was a pastor of one of the biggest churches in this area for the last 17 years. And what happened? A simple lie, but it's a big one. It's one that pastors, quite frankly, fall into so easily. And that's, I'll feel better about myself if you like me. I'll feel better about myself if I have your good opinion, and I feel better about myself if you stay at my church. And so what do I got to do? I got to keep pleasing you and pleasing you and pleasing you. All of a sudden, the respect goes down, the disconnection of the relationship happens, we've bought into the lie, hook, line, and sinker, and we sink. This is what Satan wants to do so bad. His goal is to get you to buy into this big lie. My worth and my value is somehow connected to how I perform and what people think of me.